Thank you for joining us today at Naturally Scott with Scott Harris. Not surprisingly, I'm Scott Harris, and I'll be your host on this journey. At least once a week, I'll bring you the very best of America's spectacular world of nature, from birds to mammals to reptiles and amphibians, from soaring mountains to endless plains, from rugged coastlines to rivers and streams. Each episode will feature an expert guest, a ranger, a researcher, a birder, or an adventurer, someone who has seen what we want to see and been where we want to go. This isn't just another nature show, it's a safari for your ears. Now let's get started on today's adventure. Hey, thank you so much for joining us today. I really do appreciate it. Naturally Scott with Scott Harris is very excited to have our inaugural guest, our initial guest, the very first one. I'll see how many other ways I can come up with saying that, but Greg Miller is our guest today, and I'm really excited about the conversation we're going to have and getting your guys' feedback when it's over. I know Greg. I met Greg a few months ago. He was graciously agreed to be a guest in a book I'm writing called Why We Love Birds, and we had a great interview. We've become friends since. Greg has stayed at the house, which was an honor and a privilege, until he got here and I got to know him a little bit. But it has been a joy to get to know Greg, and I am absolutely honored that he's agreed to be with us today. I find him to be a fascinating person, a great birder, but a fascinating person as well. And I think you guys are going to feel the same way. For those of you who are long-time and deep-seated birders, you probably know Greg dating back to 1998 when he did a big year, and he's going to tell us about that today. It was different than most, maybe different than any, and that turned into a 2004 book, brilliantly titled The Big Year, which led to an equally brilliantly titled motion picture called The Big Year, which starred Jack Black playing our dear friend now Greg Miller, which was pretty exciting. I saw that movie back in 2011, although I wasn't a birder at the time, and I loved the movie, and I love the character that Jack Black played, so it's going to be fun. Now, that is the part of Greg's life that catapulted him to bird fan. He became famous through that, but it does not define Greg. We're going to learn today that there's a lot more to Greg than a big year that an author and a movie producer grabbed onto. I don't mean to minimize in any way the book of the movie. The list of movies made about my life is fairly short, one less than Greg's, as a matter of fact. But that being said, I want to be clear that, we'll talk about it, and it's a highlight. And Greg has shared with me privately and publicly that it is one of the joys and prides of his life. There's a lot more to Greg Miller that we're going to learn about today. So I think that's going to be a pretty cool deal, and I'm looking forward to it. But let's not be silly. Let's go ahead and fire it up and talk a little bit about this big year. If we go back before the book and before the movie, 1998, no eBird, no social media, a completely different world. And we can talk about it or not, but the day before this started, you finalized your divorce, which I tend to think is probably significant emotionally.
It was.
Your finances dictated that you worked full time. I studied a lot of big years going back to Ken Kaufman's hitchhiking around the country. And as far as I can tell, among the people who had a successful big year, which you did, among those people, you may be the only one that had a full-time gig while you were doing this, which alone makes it unusual. So let's go ahead. I'm done now. Why don't you take us through the process of determining that you were going to do a big year and what that was like to work for a year while you tried to track down 700 and some odd birds around a fairly large country, which at the time still contained Attu, which now is not part of, it's still part of the country, but it's no longer part of the normal birding realm. So, Greg, go ahead, man. Take it.
Well, 1998 was a long time ago, especially in terms of technology, because, wow, I had no laptop, no GPS, and I used paper maps, and no cell phone. I carried quarters around in my pocket every day to use um, payphones at phone booths to call Rare Bird Alert. I often had a little tablet with me, and so I could write down the birds on the Rare Bird Alert without having to call again and pay another 25 cents. Because that's and I did have a Walmart uh, calling card back then, and I could call from hotel rooms to call my dad, who was a birder, who I stayed connected with through the year. But the reporting was pretty crazy back then. That we had a few I forget, but the listservs on mainframes, and you connected. Back then, I connected with an AOL CD. Had to unplug my phone from my apartment wherever I was at, and it was the technology alone was pretty sparse compared to what we have available today.
So let me ask you, you look back at that a quarter of a century ago, which in some ways is forever, certainly based on technology it is. In other ways, it was yesterday. Do you look back at that as a pain in the ass, or do you look back at that a little bit romantically?
I look at it a little romantically because a lot of people, as a very popular question I get is, knowing what you know now, would you change your course or your priorities? Well, of course I would, but I did. I would use the same priorities I used back then. I used probability, and it was the probabilities that I played. Uh, the Where's the best place to find these birds at the best time of year, and a lot of people talk about chasing all the rarities, and yeah, if you're going to be competitive, you have to chase a whole lot of rarities, but you need to have in the back of your mind at the core to use probabilities of the best times to see birds, because you need to give yourself the best opportunities to get the greatest number of species everywhere you go. And so it needs to be very efficient, but you need to allow enough flexibility that you have a plan B in case you run after a rare bird. Because if you only go after rare birds, there are some birds that are regularly occurring birds that are difficult enough that if you only chase rare birds, you would miss them.
So is there a I mean, it would appear to me, and I'm a relatively new birder, so I started 5 years ago. So I don't know a world without GPS and cell phone and Sibley apps and eBird and being able to call friends for free around the country and say, "Can you get me on a northern hawk owl?" And so I know that world, but I don't know that world since I started birding. And so it's foreign to me to imagine the world that you were in, and only 27 years ago,
Yeah.
a blink of the eye in some cases. And so, is there a part of you, if you had to do it over again and you could have waited until all the technology existed, would you have rather done it in the Stone Age like you did, or in today's world where they tell you right down to the tree where you can find the bird?
There are benefits to both. Before, I think I had more dopamine because there was less that was known, and the sense of reward when you were successful may have been greater, as opposed to um, nowadays, where you know where everything is, how long it's there. Uh, People that it'd be easier to find birds, so you're going to be more affected by the numbers going up than the individual finds themselves, in my opinion, just on how um, hormones work. The dopamine part of the whole dopamine thing is not just getting the reward, but it's the path you take to get to your reward that builds up expectation and excitement.
I
So
could
it's
be
more
wrong.
addictive.
I could be wrong, and I certainly don't mean any disrespect to the people that are doing big years now or have done them in the days of modern technology. But it strikes me that it would require more skill to have done it in the days when you did it. One step past riding a horse and mailing a letter to try to find a bird. It just seems to me that that would be the case.
It requires more money now, certainly because there are more birds to chase. Um, but if a person had a good network of people and a lot of money, you could have done really well in the past as well.
Okay. Well, you mentioned money. You did not have any. Um, each,
I
each.
did have money, just not as much as my competitors.
So tell us what that was like. Um, it's interesting because when you talk to people about big ears and in the book Why We Love Birds, I've interviewed a number of people that did big ears. One who only did it by bicycle, Ken Kaufman, hitchhiked. You had the rich, you had the poor. I interviewed a young man who wasn't born when you did your big year, and just set the record. So it's a completely different world. But tell us what it was like, as much as you're comfortable sharing, coming off the emotional issue that you had, and having to work and finagle things with your boss and have some help from your parents, and not have the luxury of zipping across on a 747 to pick up, say, a Bahama Mockingbird in Florida. So tell us what that was like. How did that impact your year and your struggle and your quest?
Well, the divorce, nobody's divorce is a fun one, but mine, I'm a very emotional person, and it was a very tough one. And I know myself pretty well. And when I started out, I told myself, man, if I don't have something that I can throw myself into to be distracted, I'm going to find myself wallowing around and in self pity and not being likable by anybody. So I thought I would do a big year, and I was going to go after a personal big year. I didn't even think 700 was possible when I started, but with the emotional duress of the divorce finally going through and finalized, I threw myself into the big year because I told myself all I've got left is birds. I obviously can't get along with people, and so
Well, let's
I
just say one person.
well, relationships. We'll leave it at that. And
Okay.
so um, I I knew I loved birding. I'd been birding since knee high to a duck. My dad got me into birding so early in life. I don't remember the first place I went birding. I don't remember whenever I got binoculars. I've always loved birding and always had binoculars. So this is something that I had a great love of birds before I ever took on this aspect of birding, which I am now well known for. But it's really the love of the birds that kept me going. Um,
Okay. Had you considered doing a big year previous to 98?
I had considered like wondering what kind of a number I could get while working full time, because I never considered taking off a whole year. I couldn't afford that. So I was pampered by that, and I was curious. So 1997, I was we had already separated, and I took I was computer programmer, contractor, and so when I worked, I got paid. When I didn't work, I didn't get paid. I took 4 weeks of vacation, and I was living in Maryland at the time. I birded every weekend, and took those 4 weeks, and it ended up with 536 species of birds for the ABA area, the American Birding Association area, which included Alaska, all of Canada, lower 48, but not Hawaii, not the Caribbean, not Mexico. Um, And so I knew 600 was probably a fair number to go after. Uh, so that's how I set out. But I threw myself so heartily into the year that, and I was successful everywhere I went, including going to Attu in May and having really the trip of a century on Attu.
Tell us about that, because Attu's always been difficult to get to, but now it's borderline impossible. They've closed the runway to the public, and so tell us what that was like for those of us that may never get to go. Make us feel even worse about that.
So, at the end of the 1990s, Larry Balch had been taking leading tours with groups of people out to Attu twice each May, an early trip and a later trip. He'd done it for 22 years before I went, the 23rd year. And it had been an amazing thing. And I had read in American Birding Association's Birding Magazine that there was talk of maybe discontinuing this adventure. And I didn't want to, go through life looking back and saying, oh, I should have gone to Attu. That's a good recipe for regret. You need to do things in life when you can, not when it's convenient. And there's just some things that you have to prioritize. And the way I prioritize things is I project myself forward and I look backward. How will I feel if this closes down and I no longer have access to this wonderful place with all these incredible sounding birds? A whole bunch of Asian species. It's just a phenomenal place. And it's one of the only mountainous islands in the Aleutians. It is 1,500 miles west of Anchorage. If Anchorage was St. Louis, Missouri, Attu would be San Francisco. It's an incredible scale. And so you're actually much closer to Russia than you are to Anchorage when you fly out there. And so the hope is during spring migration, when birds come back to breed in the Siberian tundra, that some of them get blown off course and come to land on Attu and delight the birders that were there looking for them.
So, how many birds did you find in 1998?
715.
And how many of those were from Attu?
Actually, there were not all that many birds. Of the birds that were what I call quality birds, I saw 21 of the 22 Asian vagrants that were reported that year on Attu. And to put it in perspective, if all of those birds would have been found in North America and I would have had to chase, last minute chases back then, I could figure about $1,000 per trip and about a 50% success rate back then. So to get 21 of those means I would have been 42 trips or about $42,000 worth of travel that I got for back then, $4,500 for 2 weeks on Attu. Then we got to stay in a World War II cement bunker on the island that was actually a real bunker that was used during World War II.
Now, we've talked about Attu before, and you shared with me that the romantic portion of the movie did not play out in real life the way it did in the movie.
Correct.
But outside of that, how close did the movie depict your time on Attu? Were you crammed into cots? Were you fighting for bikes? Were you carrying bikes through creeks? And
We didn't do the carrying bikes through creeks, but they did that on previous trips when the white-tailed eagle was present for a few years. People had to cross a creek with bikes like that. Uh, the barracks that are represented in the movie are real enough that they actually fooled a couple of people who'd actually been to Attu. And they asked me, how did you get back out to Attu for the filming of the movie? And of course, we didn't go there. And that occurred about 200 miles north of Whitehorse, Yukon, I believe it was. And there was Royal Canadian Mounted Police with guns to protect the cast in the movie set while they were filming. As far as accuracy goes, I would say there's at least 50% that was pretty spot on, and another maybe 20% that was reasonably conveyed. And then there was the remaining 30% completely made up or incorrect. And it made a good story all on its own, because one of the things it did best was capture kind of how hectic the emotions of the ups and downs of things that happened during the year. This get played out in real life, and it's a wild ride. There are things that are very fun, and there are things that are very hard. When you miss birds that you were really counting on, or that you spend a lot of money on, or a lot of time, or those are things that you remember more fondly later than you do while it's happening.
What were the couple of birds that you most regretted not getting? Ones that you came within a short time of getting, or invested a lot of time or money?
There were a dozen species that I missed inside 24 hours.
All right, you got to tell us.
It just happens. You get on a plane and you're headed back home, and you read about, the bird showed back up at the place that you were at maybe 2 or 3 times during your trip to a particular location. It just happens. And these are things that you have to, ahead of time, kind of program yourself that you're going to roll with it, because it is all probability. You're going to get some birds and you're going to miss some birds. And you can't predict ahead of time what birds those are. And that's part of the game.
Can you pinpoint the most surprising bird that you got in the year?
Probably the most surprising birds I got were 3. Oriental greenfinch.
Where?
And pin-tailed snipe, both on Attu. And these are both second records for all of North America in all of history. And then the other one was Netting's flycatcher, which now shows up more regularly than it did. But when I saw it in 1998, the previous record was 40 years previous to that. So these were all grand surprises. Probably my worst miss, what you were talking about earlier, the most unbelievable is snowy owl. Now, how do you miss a snowy owl? But I had people who promised me snowy owls, and I went with them, and we went to locations where they were the day before or the day after. It was hiding from me everywhere I went. I must have taken 7 or 8 trips, and
there's another book that that I'm working on, or it's actually the development of a TV show, and part of that is, as you know, in the book, one of the questions that I asked you is, do you have a nemesis bird? Now, you had the clearest definition of nemesis bird, and we'll get back to that. But I asked all my guests that, and you'd be surprised, by far out of the 52 guests, the one missed the most is an owl, whether it's a great gray or a northern hawk or a boreal or a saw-whet. And some of these are world-renowned birders. I mean, they are, you would have assumed they'd seen everything. And they're kind of sheepish. Well, I hate to admit it, but I've never seen a northern hawk owl. which I know you and I share as a favorite bird.
Right.
But I want to get off the movie and get onto some other things, the rest of Greg Miller. But before I do, I'd like to give you an opportunity to set the record straight on the difference between your father and Brian Dennehy.
Uh, Unlike the movie where Brian Dennehy was antagonistic to Jack Black's pursuit of doing a big year.
I'm sorry, let me interrupt you. Just to be clear, Brian Dennehy portrayed Greg's father in the movie, just in case you didn't know that. And so now Greg's going to tell us the difference between the character in the movie and his own dear father.
My dad got me started birding, like I said before. I can't remember getting binoculars, can't remember where I first went birding, can't remember my first bird. I have always loved birds as long as I can remember. And I have periods of my life where I go kind of in and out, where I have more opportunity to go birding and sometimes less opportunity, depending on responsibilities. But my dad was always supportive of me going birding. And when I did a big year, I called him every night from out in the field, and I would tell him, recap the day's events. And he got to live my big year vicariously throughout that year. Every single evening, I would call from my hotel room and recap the day and where I was and what I saw and how exciting it was.
I'm going to guess those calls were just as important to you as they were to your father.
They were. My dad was an anchor for me. Having relationships with people who are supportive of you, no matter what, it's there's nothing that is as great as a good relationship.
Well, I'm excited for you that you have it, and that you were able to share that with your father over the course of that year. That's a pretty cool deal, Greg. Everything else, 7:15 or 6:50 or 7:55, being able to share that with your dad every night, that's a pretty cool deal. And not everybody has that relationship. As a matter of fact, most don't. And I'm sorry they didn't depict that in the movie, but it was a fictionalized version. And so there you go.
Inspired by.
So moving past the movie, what you have shared with me is that when the movie came out in 2011, so 14 years ago, it shifted you into an ambassador in the birding world. And as a matter of fact, you have shared with me in the past a phrase that you coined, which is you now do more peopling than you do birding. So tell us what it means to you to be looked at as an ambassador for birding, how it's impacted your actual birding, and then how it's impacted your life overall.
It's impacted my own personal birding because I don't get to chase as much as I used to. I still enjoy it when I do get an opportunity, but I can't just go to a festival and look at my watch and I got a notification of a rare bird. I need to leave, find somebody else. That's not going to work. Or if I'm a field guide at some festival, or if I'm on tour somewhere in South America, I can't just pick up and leave to go chase a rare bird in North America. So that part has really changed because in many ways, the life I now live has more restrictions for birding than actually when I was a computer programmer contractor, where I had a lot more freedom. But now I realized that what I have is a gift that very few people have. Very few people have a movie after a year of their life where they just went crazy and did what they wanted to do. I tell people it's the craziest thing that the most irresponsible and selfish year of my life is now the most celebrated. But when the movie came out, I realized
to all of us.
When the book and the movie came out, I realized not everybody has this opportunity, and this is so much bigger than I am that I realized I've been gifted a the potential to be able to represent birds, birding, science, uh, for to a lot of the world that would never have been exposed to birding at all, and that is a real privilege. That is an honor that I have taken upon myself because that's what I felt like I should do, like it's the right thing to do.
So, in addition to being a gift and an honor, there is also a level of responsibility that you feel that you have toward the birding community at large.
I do.
Okay.
I
When you go to a festival, you go to the biggest week, or you go down to wherever you're going at the various festivals. Are you generally recognized?
I am now. It was more fun early on when the movie first came out, and I could be in the audience or um, be with people talking about the movie, and they would be talking about this character, and they may have read about Greg Miller in the book, and they will talk about Greg Miller, and I'll talk about Greg Miller too, and it's kind of fun to play, yeah, put some horns on, play devil's advocate, and kind of let them walk into meeting me for the first time. But
Well,
now my face is all over the place, and I have a hard time going to any popular birding location without being recognized, and that also detracts from my personal birding. But I will tell you, if you're watching this right now, even though that detracts from my own personal birding, you should come up, tap me on the shoulder, say, "Yeah, I want a selfie with you. Would you sign my book?" or whatever, because that's the new me. Because I would do the same thing. I would want this out of another birder if this happened to them and I had the opportunity to meet them. This is how I act, like the person I would hope another person would be for me.
well, that's actually a spectacular lesson for all of us, inside and outside of birding, as a matter of fact. Of course, with your charm and good looks, it would be happening anyway. I, on the other hand, have no charm, no good looks, and no movie. So I,
Yet,
I can anonymously bird anywhere in the world, and I am.
I say yet because I did not plan on this life.
Well, we'll see. As my wife said, if I intend to do a big year, I need to announce my big year and my divorce at the same time. So, other than Raptor Quest, which we've talked about, but all I did there was chase 53 raptors, which was pretty cool. And I want to talk to you about that because the cover of that book is a northern hawk owl. And if memory serves me from our interview for Why We Love Birds, that is your favorite bird as well.
It is
Okay, tell us why.
in North America.
In North America. Okay, tell us why it is, and then tell us what bird outside of North America.
Okay. The northern hawk owl, I think the thing I like the best about it is it's kind of a unique owl in that it's a diurnal owl. It's a daytime owl. It hunts during the day, unlike most other owls. And it is called a hawk owl because it's got a long tail and it has some of the agility of a normal hawk, like another raptor. Um, but the thing I like best is its personality. The personality is absolutely fearless. Like if you see them several times over, you'll accidentally see them very close up and they're not even paying attention to you, but they are solely focused on their food source, and they're so focused on food that everything else is immaterial. So I can relate to that desire for food, and I like its fearless uh, It doesn't care much about its other surroundings. It's focused on getting its prey, and it's very successful too.
Well, they are. They're amazing hunters. I can only call it a spiritual moment with the northern hawk. And Greg, I may have shared this with you, but I'll share it with our viewers and our listeners. I was looking for one for the book Raptor Quest, where I chased all 53 of the raptors in the lower 48 states. And the northern hawk was my last one. And I had been given a lead that there was one in Wise River, Montana. So I jumped on a plane and flew out there and drove 3 or 4 hours to Wise River. And I did not find the bird. I found 2 other cars with people who had found the bird. And so I got to watch the bird for a couple hours that first evening. I went back the next morning. It was snowing. It was minus 20 something degrees. The owl didn't care. I was a little chilly. And when I got back, and it was a little 1-lane dirt road, and the owl the night before had been on an unused telephone pole, or now defunct telephone pole, I guess, no wires or anything. And when I got back in the morning, it was still there. And it let me watch it for about 2 hours and let me shoot it. And I was across the street from it, but the little dirt road was no more than 15 feet wide. And at the end of about 2 hours, and it dove twice. I saw it successfully hunt once. I saw it attempt 2 hunts. And it dropped down from the telephone pole. And when it got about 1.5 feet above the ground, it turned 90 degrees. And as you know, on an instant, right, on a dime, it's like a zero-turn lawnmower. I mean, it just 90 degrees. It came across the road, and with its left wing, it brushed my left leg. Now, there's no way the bird didn't know I was there. I'd been there 2 hours. I'm 200 plus pounds. I'm 6 feet tall. I'm breathing. So the northern hawk owl knows me better than I know myself. I realize that it's anthropomorphism, and I get all of that. But somehow I felt that bird was communicating with me. And then it brushed my leg with its left wing, continued across this open field, left, and I came back 2 more days, kept looking for it, never found it again. But for me, that was absolute magic. And the picture I got of that beautiful bird is the one I wound up putting on the cover of that Raptor Quest book.
And that's a beautiful picture.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that haven't had the good fortune of seeing a northern hawk owl. Chris Cooper, who a lot of people know. Chris has not seen a northern hawk owl. Now, part of that is because Chris has declared that he never wants to go below 45 degrees Fahrenheit.
Well, that'll make it a little more difficult.
Yeah, making it challenging to find a northern hawk owl. But we're going to get him on one. That's something we're going to do. Anyway, you mentioned earlier you didn't have a spark bird. You've been birding over 50 years. You did tell me a story that your mom said when she took you to a pond when you were just more than an infant and you found some ducks at the pond. And you want to share that and let the readers know?
So a few years ago, my dad has passed away 2 years after my big year. So he never got to read the book, never got to see the movie he would have enjoyed, even though he was not portrayed correctly. I asked my mom, how early was it that you knew that I was interested in birds? And she said, before you could talk. Well, this raised red flags in my mind immediately. How in the world can you tell a person likes birds before they can talk? So I must have been pretty young. She said, your dad and I took you to a duck pond, and I held you up, and there were ducks very close by, and you pointed, giggled, and kicked your feet when you looked at the ducks. So my spark bird was probably a mallard. They are pretty handsome birds.
They are a handsome bird, and you would be the only person in the book that had the mallard as a spark bird. I may change yours from nothing to mallard in the book.
It probably high probability.
All right, fair enough. So one of the questions I asked everybody in the book is, do you have a nemesis bird? And if you don't know what a nemesis bird is, it's a bird you've gone after more than once. It's a bird that you want to get on and you haven't been able to see. Often it's a rarity, and that's fine. But every once in a while, it's a bird, like you mentioned earlier, Greg, snowy owls, that other people have found with relative ease. But nonetheless, that's why it's a nemesis bird. But you're the only one of the book, and I think your mind works differently than most human beings. But you're the only one that gave an exact definition for a nemesis bird. Do you remember what that was?
I think it probably mentioned 10 attempts.
Yes.
As a nemesis, or if you get up close to eight or nine, you're hooked on finding that bird. And
you actually used 9. You said if you go after a bird 9 times and don't get it, it's a nemesis. You didn't say it, but I saw in your eyes that the 10th time you're going out is with a shotgun. So I'm not sure what that means. And I think it's a Bahama mockingbird.
Yes,
that is your current.
It's still I still have managed to miss it every time I've gone after it.
Well, I'm hoping that you get it.
I hope so too.
Now, I asked my guests what their favorite birding day is. And most of them have a story that's a little bit different than yours. And this is going to harken back to the movie. But go ahead and share with us your favorite birding day. Okay.
But I'm first going to go back and finish the question about my favorite bird in the world, sword-billed hummingbird. It's a bird from South America that's very, very local. And the bill is longer than the bird itself. It's impressive. And I can't get over it. Go ahead.
I've not seen that. Thank you for bringing me back to that question. And I've not seen it, but I'll bet you that when we're done here, there will be a number of people going online and looking that bird up because they won't have heard of a bird, a hummingbird that has a bill longer than its body.
Yeah. And I will say my shameless plug here, Wildside Nature Tours is the place where I got to see my lifer sword-billed hummingbird. It was quite an experience, and still an experience that I love. Every time I go look at it, I'm awed by that bird. But
what country was that?
I saw it in Ecuador, northern Ecuador.
My wife and I just booked a trip to the Galapagos. So we're going next September of 26. And that'll be a first for us. My son's actually going to Ecuador next week, but he's going down for a wedding. Not his, but he's going to Ecuador. I've never been. Hey, and I do want to share with our listeners, I had mentioned before that Greg came by and visited here at the house, which was a thrill for me. And here's how good of a birder he is. We're sitting in my living room talking, and he hears a horned grebe out on the lake. I'm lucky enough to live on a lake. And that was a yard bird for me. So here's a guy sitting on a chair and identifies a horned grebe. We, of course, jumped up, grabbed the binoculars and the scope and got a good look at it. But that was amazing, and got an extra yard bird out of it.
Actually, I didn't hear it, but I did see the birds in the water, and they look kind of black and white. And I put my binoculars up and interrupted our conversation to point out the horned grebes. It's fun to see. I could be having a great conversation at any point in time, and I'm constantly interrupted by birds, no matter how much I'm trying to focus on, talking to people. So if that's me talking with you out, the people who are listening, it just happens. Birds happen.
So Greg's warning you in advance. He's not doing it to be rude, but he's not going to turn away from an interesting bird in order to finish a story, either listening or telling. So be aware if you run into him somewhere.
Yes,
especially on the boardwalk at McGee Marsh.
People joke about squirrel. It's a neat bird.
Fair enough. Now, in the book, Why We Love Birds, which isn't out yet, by the way, of course, I'll notify everybody when it is, but Greg is a guest in there. One of the things that the publisher is doing is adding a photograph that is supplied by each of the guests that are in the book, the 52 guests. I just got Greg's yesterday or the day before, sent me a spectacular picture of a Blackburnian warbler. Now, if you don't know, Greg is a warbler guy. But Greg, tell us your photography path. When did you fire it up, and how serious are you?
I've been taking pictures for a long time. Usually not so seriously. I have not done it professionally. I just have been an amateur. But my first camera was a Kodak Pocket Instamatic. It took slides, and you slid it like this, and it was just like the size of a thick, like a power bank, and you open and close the shutter, and it would advance it. And that was my first camera. So I started shooting film up through the late 90s, or film cameras, not digital. And I got my first digital camera in the early 2000s. And I had just bridge cameras back then because everything was really expensive at the beginning. But here in the last 10 to 15 years, I've been upping my game with better cameras, better lenses. And I currently shoot an OM Systems OM1 Mark II. And I have several lenses that I use. My Bird lens is the big one, 150 to 600 millimeter f5 to 6.3. And it's a tank for a 4/3 format. It's as heavy as any other lens, except for, a big prime from like Nikon or Canon.
Right.
But I like, for my own personal shooting, the micro 4/3 things that I like the best about the OM Systems setup, the weatherproofing, and the 2x crop factor. For me, this is not a detriment, but a plus for me, because I can shoot shots with a 2x crop factor, and I'm already zoomed in. I can already see what the composition is going to be when I take the picture. And now that I have good enough camera, good enough lens, and good enough editing software, I know I can push my ISO high enough that I can get a fast shutter speed and get tack sharp, clear photographs.
Okay.
And it has changed how I shoot and has made my photography look much, much better.
All right. And we'll be sure to send a copy of this to Olympus so they know that you're out there taking care of them. So Greg, as an ambassador, as we wrap this up, as an ambassador, as a peopler, and as a birder, what's next for you? What do you see on the horizon?
Well, I got a 30-year anniversary for the big year coming up, 1998 to 2028. And so if you're out there listening and you have some ideas of stuff you'd like to see me do, or try to pull something off, let me know. I'm open to ideas. I probably will not do a full-on big year again, just because it takes me away from everybody else and all other things, and it's only one focus, and I don't do anything but that. It's like an Olympian. If you train for the Olympics, you pretty much cancel everything else for that one thing. And that I did for 1 year, but I have enough things now I probably wouldn't want to give up, that I wouldn't be opposed to maybe doing something like a big month. Like I think I talked to you, Scott, about the potential of doing like a big 30 days where I try to see over 400 species of birds in 4 weeks. That I think is definitely a doable thing, and maybe raise some money for some conservation projects or birding related things, and
Well, if you decide to do that, put me down for the first donation. And and keep in mind when you say that seeing 400 birds in 4 weeks is very doable. I'm going to guess that a large percentage of the people that are kind enough to be listening to us right now may not have 400 life birds, much less 400 April birds. So that's a big number. But you're right; it is doable with proper planning, which you can now do. You're going to be a guest on this show again, so we're going to talk about some of the technology that you've embraced with the weather and whatnot, because we didn't get a chance to get to it today. But Greg's got some quirks that are fun and interesting, and you haven't lived till you get Greg texting you weather maps on what might be happening where he is or where he thinks you are. So that's a pretty cool deal. Greg, I got to tell you, man, sincerely, as a first guest, you have been spectacular. You are so
Thank
generous.
you so much for having me.
It has been absolutely my joy and my pleasure. And I'm looking forward to having you back again. I'm looking forward to having more guests on. This for me is a joy. This isn't work. This isn't a struggle. This is an absolute pleasure. And I think in a way it's a little bit like you with your peopling. I'm not actually out birding, but I am. I'm enjoying birding. I'm enjoying you and the conversation, and it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure for me as well. I can tell you're passionate, and I can tell you love this. And this kind of format is going to reach some people that have never even heard about birding, and how much fun it can be. And hopefully we'll get more people outside, and it stimulates some of those happy hormones that go with it.
That'll be exciting. Thank you very much. This is a wrap for today with Greg Miller. I'm so excited that you joined us, and I hope you come back and visit us next week. Take care, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Hello, this is Scott Harris with the first ever Field Notes. Field Notes is a little segment I'm going to add at the end of each podcast, just to talk about some things that are interesting or unusual or new, or at least new to me, and things that I want to share with you, the listeners and the viewers. So I hope that's something that you'll stay tuned for every week. And we're going to fire up the first one talking about sea otters. The focus or the motivation is northern sea otters, because just last month, my wife and I were up in Alaska for a few weeks, and we got to spend some time with northern sea otters, got some great pictures, and got to watch them out in their natural habitat, and it was spectacular and interesting. And over the last few months, I've also made some trips to California where I spent some time with the California sea otters. So we're going to do a little compare and contrast between the two, and I hope that you enjoy that and learn something and are motivated to even learn more or spend some time with these amazing animals. They are, well, as most of us know, they are among the cutest animals in all of nature. And the ones that we saw up in Alaska last month were absolutely no different. So let's get to it, talk about some of the differences. The northern sea otters are found from the Aleutian Islands and down south through the coastlines of Alaska, and more recently into British Columbia, where a population has been reintroduced into Washington state. California sea lions are more between Santa Barbara and Half Moon Bay, or easier to grasp between LA and San Francisco, and they're along the coastline of California. The northern populations have rebounded much better than their southern cousins. Both of them were nearly exterminated by hunting primarily, and that was something we did as men. And the good news is, as people, we are bringing them back. We are reintroducing them and taking care of them, so maybe paying a little bit for our past sins. Alaska alone now has over 70,000 northern sea otters, which is just remarkable. Down south, the California sea otters, there's only about 3,000 individuals. They have a much stronger struggle to go through. There are ecological threats like disease and oil spills that really hamper their ability to expand their numbers, but they are fighting and making every effort, and hopefully they will. Northern sea otters are much larger. The males can get up to 100 pounds, usually running between 80 and 100 pounds. California sea otters usually max out at around 65 to 75. They both have thick, lush fur, the lushest fur in all of the animal kingdom, and which is one of the reasons, of course, that they were hunted.
But in the north, it's even more robust and thicker, and that is because it's colder up there, and they've just developed that fur to battle the freezing waters of northern Alaska and the Aleutian Islands. The northern sea otters can often be found in large rafts. Sometimes there are hundreds of individuals. Rafts are when the animals collect, whether it's birds like gulls will collect in rafts, but otters will collect in rafts and they gather together. It provides warmth. It provides protection. It's just that many more eyes looking for predators. And so they will gather up in those large groups. California sea otters will also raft up, but their groups are about 10 to 20. When I was in Alaska last month, I saw some small rafts of northern sea otters, did not see anything approaching hundreds. I have seen rafts in California up to about 10, maybe a dozen. I've not seen 20, but they're pretty cool to see a group of sea otters collected together. They are both keystone species. Well, they're subspecies of the same animal, but they are both keystone animals in that they help keep the sea urchin in check, especially in California, because sea urchins will devastate kelp if left to their own devices. And the California sea otters eat a large number of them, and that achieves a natural balance between sea urchins, otters, and kelp. Same thing happens up north, although northern sea otters have a wider variety of food that they eat. They'll eat clams and crabs and snails and even octopus, just because they have access to more up there. Both of them use tools. You'll see them if you get a chance, or you can look on YouTube and see videos of them, or a couple of the pictures I'm posting. And all the pictures that are here, by the way, are all of the northern sea otter. I'll find a time to post some southern sea otter pictures another day. But you'll see the sea otters will put rocks on their chest and use those to smash open the sea urchins or the clams or whatever it is they might be eating. It's a pretty cool thing to see. Northern sea otters are starting to face an increasing threat from killer whale. As the population has grown, killer whales, who are extremely intelligent and extremely aggressive and extremely adaptable, have found that a nice 75-pound sea otter makes for a pretty good snack. And in some areas, they have actually halved the otters population. So we're going to watch, and there will be a natural balance that is achieved between the orcas hunting and the sea otters. It's painful to watch now because everyone's excited about that sea otter population growing, and the orcas are doing what they can to see that that doesn't continue. But there will be a balance achieved over the years. And so I just wanted to share those things for you. I think they're very exciting, very fun, very intelligent, and obviously extremely cute animals to watch. So I hope you get a chance to do that. I also hope you get a chance to join us next week on Naturally Scott with Scott Harris. My guest is going to be Laura Erickson. Laura has published a number of books, probably 24. The most recent is 100 Plants to Feed the Birds, which is a great tool for gardeners and landscapers to use. She has written fiction and nonfiction and field guides and children's books. She's done a lot of different things. She has a regular radio program called For the Birds, and she's got a regular blog that is primarily based on that program. She's going to be joining us next week. I'm very much looking forward to the conversation. She is one of the guests in my upcoming book called Why We Love Birds. I'm thrilled that she's done that, and I'm excited that she's joining us next week. Thank you again for listening. Have a great day. And, of course, if you have any questions, just email me at scott@naturallyscott.com, and I will answer any and all questions. Have a terrific day. Enjoy yourselves. Goodbye now.